Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today is a new series that's going to be going on for a while. So I ironically just got a comment as of recording this asking when this series is coming up, and it's like I've been prepping and doing stuff and getting ready for it. So here we are. So this is a series that will be going until sometime in November, and basically what this is planning out a witchy wedding. Now some people won't care, that's fine, but if you are planning a witchy wedding or you're thinking about it and maybe the topics just interest you, hopefully you'll stick around for it. So I've got a variety of topics because really I haven't found much information for planning a witchy wedding. There's information of like, here's, the basics of a wedding video in like 10 minutes. And it mostly talks about like hand fastings and, are you gonna be closeted or not? And that's about it. And then there's talks of like traditional, like just a regular old wedding. Lots of videos on that. But if you're looking for like a pagan or a witch wedding, it's really just the ceremonies that are posted. And that's fine, gives you some ideas. But typically they are very flamboyantly pagan. Like, some people don't want to be that elaborate with their family because you, like me and the partner, it's only us really. My mom's kind of into it somewhat, but the rest of our family is like super not at all, not religious. So like, we don't want to make our guests feel uncomfortable. Obviously the wedding is for us, but we'll get there when we get there about talking about ceremonies. But like, that's the only information I found online, is talking about, are you going to do a ceremony? Here's your ceremony options. When really there's a lot more that goes into wedding planning that you can, pull in your witchcraft things for, such as flowers, choosing your stone, blessing your dress. Like, there's so many things that you can do for a witchy wedding that I've got several to talk about for the coming months. So buckle in, we've got a long journey ahead of us. So here is the first one. So this is my top 10 things to consider when planning a witchy wedding. So this list is somewhat in order a little bit. Basically, the first two things are the first things I would start with for your wedding, and from there you can kind of go wherever you want. But number one is figure out your budget, because that will dictate everything. And, once you start looking into stuff, you might have to adjust that budget, but at least get a general idea of how much realistically you want to be spending on your wedding, because they are expensive. You can make it cheaper, but still it's expensive. So once you have your budget kind of in mind, like for us, we initially started at about $10,000 as our budget, and then we started to look around and realized that isn't going to cover it, because things are expensive, and when multiple things are costing thousands of dollars, you have to adjust accordingly. Thankfully my mom's helping to pay for a lot of it, but this is also in our budget, was including our rings, and so that took up a decent chunk. Like, our rings alone were over $5,000, and our venue is around $3,000. So like, right there, that only leaves you a squish room of $2,000, and our photographer and videographer is like $2,500. So not thousand, $2,500. But still, it leaves you with this like, okay, I really have to actually plan accordingly. So that being said, the next thing to consider is your theme. Now, if you want to have a very elaborate witchy theme, that's fine. If you want to go more like Hollywood style witchy wedding, cool. If you want to, like what we're doing is like rustic or kind of foresty, naturey. So it's like subtle witchcraft because like that's what we wanted. We don't want to be very in your face to our family about things, but there's, we're still gonna have like the hand fasting cords, which is gonna be a little weird to the family. But like, we're saving like jumping the broom for when we get back to the hotel room, because they are gonna be really confused. And, we wanted like the overall view of our wedding to be very witchy, and we can have it very subtle. So for us, like, our paths are very nature-based, so it makes sense that, we started to pick things along that vein. So we have our decor that's very naturey, and like, it's really easy to find rustic as a theme that's kind of more witchy-ish if you go more naturey. And of course, everyone's idea of what that looks like is different, but it worked for us. Of course, if you're doing more of like a Halloween wedding, you're gonna wanna wait until it's closer to the Halloween season to start stocking up on things. But there are some really beautiful Halloween weddings out there, so if you wanna do that, that totally would work too. Or whatever else, if you wanna, you know, throw a built-in themed wedding, you could. I've seen a few pictures where people do a maypole as part of their wedding, and that would be really fun. Our venue does not have a spot to do that. And also, it'd be really weird, but it would be fun. But just like having to explain the symbolisms would be interesting, but still. And like, what would you do with it afterwards? But I mean, to each their own. So once you have a budget and you have a theme, next logical step for us was to pick a venue. This was the thing that got us the most when we were planning our wedding, is like how expensive renting a venue is, because that is where you make your money if you're in the like freaking business, because there are some cheaper places that we could have chose, but they're an empty building. That's it. You're renting a building and it's very boring, industrial stuff on top. You know, you can see the bars and like the support beams and stuff, and then it's just plastered walls and that's about it. And there's nothing to it, and that didn't appeal to us at all. Like, I despise white walls with burning passion, and that's all these venues were. There were some that were a little more church vibes, and then there was just a lot that were just really like modern and chic and like not my deal at all. And then we started to look into like more rustic buildings, but they're also very expensive. And like there was one, you get it for half a day and it's like $5,000. And then we started to worry about, because it would have the ceremony mostly outside, and then Utah weather is so bipolar, you never know what you're gonna get. And so we're like, I don't know if we want to do that. And so then we finally ended up settling that we wanted to have an indoor garden, and there's a handful of places around us, you know, within an hour or two of driving, that do have indoor greenhouses that you can get married at, that are specifically designed for weddings. Like, they have designed the building and maintained the areas to be for wedding ceremonies and receptions and whatever. And so we picked one of those because that fits our theme. We also looked, like there's one out here that's really pretty in the pictures, and it just didn't live up to what we were really hoping for the amount of money they charge. And it's an actual castle that is built here in Utah that you can get married at. And it was gonna be really cool because they have a separate building that has a honeymoon suite, and it supposedly looks over this vineyard, and it was supposed to be really pretty. But then you get, like, we drove by and then we realized, yeah, no, it's in the middle of a subdivision, and your view is like very specific. If you look at just the right angle, you can just see this little tiny garden. But if you actually look out, you just see housing and streets, and it's just like, oh look, we're in the middle of another subdivision, cool. It just wasn't worth the amount of money they were charging, and like you had to use their vendors, and it was expensive. And we just ultimately was like, no. And like we pulled into the parking lot, and the parking lot was gravel, and for anyone who's gone to weddings, most people tend to wear fancy stuff, including high heels. High heels and gravel are not good friends. So keep that in mind too if you're planning like an outdoor wedding. Like, think of your guests, not just you, because like there's some that it's like, oh, we're gonna have like an outdoor like barn wedding and everyone's gonna be sitting on straw bales. That's gonna tear up a lot of really fancy clothes. So just like little things like that, keep that in mind. Obviously it's still your day, but maybe just think a little bit about your guests too. So once you picked your venue, sometimes they will require you to use their catering, their people who do the foods and whatnot, their preferred vendors. Others don't really care. Thankfully ours is in that category. They actually don't offer catering, I don't think, so you have to bring in your own, which for us, we ended up finding a wedding planner to help us because it was super overwhelming at the beginning, because like I was not the girl who dreamt of her wedding. Like, I never really pictured I would actually find somebody and then get married. So it was like a whole new ballpark of things to consider, and I just didn't want to forget anything. So we are working with a wedding planner. She gets a kickback off of the vendors that we use, and so we've used a lot of her vendors, not all of them, but a lot. And so she just kind of helps coordinate things and is like, hey, these are some stuff that a lot of people do. And so one of the things she hooked us up with was catering. They ended up being a lot cheaper than some of the places we looked at. And so that's the next step, find somebody to cater your food. A lot of caterers will do different food options, like different meal options. Ours is just buffet style because it feels really weird to have like a very formal thing. Our family's not very formal. A wedding is pushing it. Keeping in mind your caterer will likely not be doing your wedding. That's an additional cost. I don't think I mentioned that in the list, but your wedding cake is also an expense to consider because they are expensive. Next is photography and videography. This is one that I'm in a few wedding groups, and a lot of people tend to regret not spending the money on a good photographer. And that's one of the things that throughout time, for the past, 100, 150 years, whatever, that we've had photography, that's like one of the biggest expenses, but you always tend to look back on these photos. Now, if like most people, you plan this is the final wedding, this is the only wedding you're gonna do, you want to be able to look back on this day and have really good photos to look back on. In the age of technology, some people have cut this cost and just told people to use a hashtag and take photos of their wedding for them. They don't turn out as good as a professional. You can find cheaper or more expensive photography and videography. Personally, because I like videos, I found somebody who, it was really hard to find. They were the only one I found in our entire area, because most videographers only do like a 3 to 5 minute video of your wedding. And it's like, this event is taking over several hours. Why are we shortening it to 5 minutes? And this guy, he takes enough, video, and they're usually roughly 40 minutes to an hour long. And then he also does a condensed version for like the 3 to 5 minutes. And then you can also do a package for photography as well. And so that's what we opted to do. It's more expensive, but these are the photos and things I want to look back on for the rest of my life. Next is picking out your dress slash tux and what you're gonna wear. For me, I really did not anticipate spending as much money as I did on my dress. Do I regret it? It's one of those things that it's an expense. I do love my dress. Would I, if I could go back, change it? It's so expensive. So just keep that in mind, that like a lot of people will buy their dresses from Amazon and like other places that are a lot cheaper than, a big box wedding store. And do be careful with those kinds of places. They tend to be quite sketchy. So keeping that in mind, I would never have bought my dress where I did, having gone through what we've gone through with them. So, but I still love my dress, and it was a lot of money. Plus I still have to pay for alterations. So it's a huge expense in the budget that I did not really anticipate. I really didn't think I would spend $1,000 on a dress because that's so expensive for like a dress, but I did. So keep that in mind. Also for tuxes, are you going to be, renting or buying for the groom or partner or whatever y'all are doing? Or are you going to be renting, especially if you have like groomsmen and stuff? Are they going to be renting on their own? Are you paying for it? That's an expense to consider. Same with bridesmaids if you do that. If you're buying their dresses, or are they on their own? That kind of a thing. Like for us, we're covering the cost for everybody, so it gets expensive. Next is invites and save the dates. There are some really good websites to start looking at. We ended up going through Zola because they had a really beautiful design that matched our theme really well. It's just kind of this like nighttime garden vibes to it, and it's super pretty. And they have a full set, so you can do save the dates, invites, programs, details, place cards if you're doing that, RSVPs, and thank you cards. Like, there is all of the things you could really need, and it's all in the same design, which is really nice. They are also expensive. We're not having a big wedding. It's less than 100 people, and the invites alone and save the dates for the people we're inviting was like $600 to $700. So again, weddings are expensive budget. just continuously comes up because that's the biggest thing in planning your wedding. But you can find some really cool designs. Again, we went with a rustic theme, and so we wanted like naturey vibes. We were gonna do some that were like carved wood, and like they were really pretty, but we just had a really long name and they didn't have a lot of space. So we ended up finding this other design and I really like it. But that'll be a different video. We'll go into that a little bit more. But yeah, like there's so many options. Again, if you want to do more of like a Halloween vibe, they've got those. There's so many options. Flowers is another thing. They are super expensive. Are you going to do real flowers? Are you going to do fake flowers? Are you going to do them yourself? If you are going to like DIY your flowers, or are you going to buy them from like an Etsy shop, or go to like your local like Michael's or Joann's and buy some fake flowers and make your own? There's a lot of options out there. Personally, I want fresh flowers. That's just one of the things that I really want. And also, preserving your flowers. How are you going to preserve your bouquet if you have one? Some people do, some people don't, especially in witchy weddings. Some people will just dedicate a broom as like their bouquet, which is cute. But I want an actual bouquet, and then I am planning on taking that and getting it preserved. They have a shop so far, at least that I've found. Haven't talked to them yet. It's on my to-do list. But they will put it in like a little globe, and then it is not smushed. It's just existing in a globe. My grandma did that with her flowers. I don't know whatever ended up happening to them, but I remember seeing them as a kid and they were still really pretty several years later. You also want to keep in mind for flowers how many you realistically want, especially if you're buying real flowers. They get expensive, so keep that in mind. Also, kind of going along with that is decor. Some venues like ours do have a section of stuff you can use, and then you just put it away when you're done, so you don't have to go out and buy a lot of stuff. Again, ours is more of like a rustic theme, so it has like slabs of wood that you can put on the tables and little candle holder things. So we're gonna be doing that, and we bought some LED candles to put in there. I'll be showing that soon in the what I've bought for my wedding so far video. Since ours is an indoor greenhouse, we don't have to decorate the space like if we were going to the venues that were just white walls and an industrial ceiling, or just a plain wooden barn. Like there's not a lot of detail there. So keep that in mind when you're looking at venues, how much decorating you're gonna have to do. And then lastly, what comes after the wedding is the honeymoon. Keep in mind how much your honeymoon is gonna cost you. Are you going on a big elaborate thing? Are you gonna wait a couple years to go on a big honeymoon? Or are you gonna just do a small honeymoon? Because like for us, we're not doing anything fancy. For us, our honeymoon is our break. We're not doing anything. Like we have rented a hotel nearby, not far from home, and we're just gonna hang out there and do a couple touristy things in our town. Since we don't need a registry, because we've been together for 5 years, we don't need anything. We just have it set up as like a honeymoon of like, hey, if you want to give us anything, give us things towards the honeymoon, because that's what we're working towards. We don't need pots, we don't need pans, we don't need a blender, we don't need a couch. Like, we don't need any of that stuff. We're not like starting our new life together. We've been together for 5 years. When we get married, it'll be 5 years. We're 4.5 right now. So like, it's okay. We don't need the traditional gift registry. So instead, we're putting the focus towards our honeymoon, and then also just casually paying back the wedding and our rings because it's expensive. So anyways, I hope this is a good checklist to at least start getting the gears turning for your own witchy wedding plannings. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that'll be coming up that are more specifically geared towards witchy. But again, a lot of this series is just the reality of planning your witchy wedding, which isn't always like, ooh la la, look, you get a witchy broom and you're gonna jump over a sword and you're gonna get your handfesting cords. Sometimes it's the realistics of like, do you have a budget? What's your venue gonna look like? You know, stuff like that. So anyways, I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you all next Tuesday as we continue this, but I'm trying to post Monday through Friday-ish, so stay tuned for that. If you would like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. And there is always additional content going up over there as well. So until next time, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and a comment. What would you like to see in this series? And until next time, I'll see you all later.